Okay, great. Let's make a start. Thanks everybody for joining. Thank you for giving up your time to come and join us on this Sumo Logic Cloud SIEM live demo. So my name is Stefan Tapp, and I am the security lead for the APAC region for Sumo Logic. Been involved in security operations for probably somewhere around about 20 years. Done everything from being a SOC analyst through to building security operations centers and optimization and so on and so on. So some quick housekeeping. This live webinar is being recorded. We will share that link with you afterwards. I'm happy to take any time to answer any questions you may have. If you can pop those into the Q&A section, then I'll happily answer those as we go through or pick those up towards the end. So we've given around about 30 to 45 minutes to go through this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start off with a couple of presentation slides, just talking about some of the challenges we have within security operations. And then what I'll do is I'll jump across actually and give you a live demo of the platform. So a little bit of information here then about Sumo Logic. We're a US-based company. Obviously, we kind of specialize in that continuous intelligence, security monitoring, etc. We have around 2,300 customers globally, 800 employees across the globe, with locations across the APAC region. At any given time, we have around about 100,000 active users in our platform, and as you can see here, we're ingesting over an exabyte of data every day, and we analyze over a quadrillion records every day, which is pretty heavy. Some examples of some of our current customers there. For those of you who are in the ANZ or the Australia, you'll recognize Australia Post and Allianz there for sure. So essentially, we kind of carry 4 key areas for our security intelligence solutions. We'll start off here really with our audit and compliance. It's highly scalable. It's a secure platform to store all of your data, backed by numerous certifications and attestations, PCI, SOC 2 Type 2, HIPAA, etc. It comes with a host of out-of-the-box pre-built compliance applications. And you can enjoy kind of real rapid time to value. You literally add the application from the App Store, point it towards your log sources, and then you can have all of those capabilities pretty much instantaneously. So the second solution there is our cloud security monitoring and analytics. This builds on top of that compliance. So this then leverages kind of security analytics on top of that data that you're ingesting. It also gives me the ability to be able to leverage things like CrowdStrike threat intelligence that we include as part of the solution. So I'm able to go in and look for indicators of compromise across my entire data set that I'm bringing in. So whether that's production logs, development logs, could be security focused, could be application monitoring, etc. I can actually go and look for any indicators of compromise across that entire set of data. It also offers kind of foundational correlation and alerting. We have the ability to be able to kind of do some analytics as well around some of those logs, using capabilities that we have called log reduce and log compare. So log reduce looks at a subset of logs, uses some analytics, and then kind of tells me what's different in each of those logs. And log compare could say, hey, let's have a look at this set of logs compared to yesterday at the same time, and let me highlight the things that have changed. So that's pretty good for showing me where I've got activity happening in a log source now, which is different than what I had yesterday. That kind of covers that bit. The next one here then is Cloud SIEM, and that's the one that we're going to kind of give you that live demo of today. So Cloud SIEM brings in the additional capability of continuous threat correlation across all of my log sources. Now, the real strong point here as well is that has that capability to go back over the last couple of weeks. So it's good for picking up things like low and slow attacks, etc. Additionally, on top of that, there's some other really cool technology in there, which I'll talk to you about in the demo, such as the insight clustering capability. That kind of automates that initial investigation phase for me. It's almost like having an automated level 1 analyst. And then we also add in things like global risk scoring, global intelligence scoring as well for those insights when they're generated. Finally, then on that graphic, you can see there is Cloud SIEM. So Cloud SIEM allows me to improve my SOC efficiency. It gives me repeatable processes when it comes to investigation. Being able to run a playbook against an insight that's been generated to go and run a phishing playbook, for example, and making sure that my security analysts achieve the same outcome each time. So there's kind of three key challenges that we're facing today with SIEM technology. The first one there is, blind spots are being introduced because of digital transformation. And as more and more of us are migrating to the cloud, we need to very quickly catch up with bringing those log sources in to make sure that we're not having these blind spots. And the problem is that some of those legacy security tools, some of the legacy SIEM platforms weren't actually built for the cloud. So they don't have easy ways to ingest those log sources in to address those gaps. Talking of existing security tools as well, many SOC teams are tired of that slow, inefficient, and manual workflow. They've been trying to kind of keep up with that. And that recent shift in threat landscape to now bring in cloud sources, looking for maybe something like unsecured S3 buckets, the older kind of technologies, but making that quite difficult to do. And of course, the more log sources we bring in, the more events we generate. So we need to be able to speed up our investigation time and response time, and then reduce that alert fatigue. And that's kind of my third point here really is, how do we address alert fatigue? We know that we have a global shortage, right, of security professionals in the industry. So you can't simply go out and recruit half a dozen new security analysts, drop them in front of your SIEM solution, and then expect them to be able to handle that increase in alerts that are coming through. So we need to leverage technology a little bit more smartly to do that for us. Some of the other big challenges as well, if I've got a security operations team and I'm generating too much noise for those guys, my staff turnover increases as well. It's very quick to burn out that team. They end up moving on to another opportunity, and then I've got to backfill that position and train them, and it's like a constant circle. So SIEM-Logic Cloud SIEM kind of addresses these three key areas. We can help your SOC team eliminate that security blind spot with our cloud solution. We can gather logs from on-premise, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid environments, and bring all of those in and correlate across all of those sources together. We can also speed up those threat investigations as well. A lot of our content is, out of the box content, so I have to spend less time building content and engineering my SIEM solution, and more time I can spend then on investigation, etc. And then finally, cutting through that noise, the insight capability that I'll talk to you about in a second kind of addresses that for me. It automatically looks at the things that I really should be investigating. To give you a quick example here, this was a funnel of fidelity for a customer that we did. So this was a proof of concept or a proof of value over 45 days. So this particular customer was ingesting over 10 billion records or events into the platform. Those 10 billion records were then run across our rules engine, and our rules engine has somewhere around 600 content rules out of the box. That in turn generated 9.8 million signals. That's worth kind of noting there that some of the legacy SIEM platforms, as a SOC analyst, that's where I would have to spend my time. Filtering through those and understanding what's important. I certainly remember working with some customers in Canberra many years ago, and they were generating 9 million alerts a day. with a team of 5 security analysts. There's just no way you can handle that, right? It's just an impossible task. So essentially then what happened was our insight clustering capability, that kind of came in and it looked at those 9.8 million signals. And then out of those 9.8 million, it came up with 175 insights that needed to be investigated. From that 175, 95 were deemed as no action, i.e. it could have been an administrator doing a normal day-to-day task. So not a false positive, but not a security incident either. So that would be marked as a no action required. Out of the 175, only 15 of those were actually marked as a false positive. And then finally, 65 were actually regarded as a true incident. Now, this particular customer here, before, or with their existing SIEM platform, I should say, they were looking at somewhere around about 90+% false positive rate. And you can see here, we kind of reduced that down to 9% with the Cloud SIEM platform. So that's pretty impressive. And it's worth kind of sitting and looking at some of those numbers and thinking, like, how do we address that today in our current environment? So moving on then, just before I jump into the live demo, I'm just going to kind of call out 3 key things on this left-hand side. So records are those raw events coming into the platform. We're essentially taking an event from anything. Could be Active Directory, could be AWS, CloudTrail, Guard Duty, firewall, email, endpoint, whatever. It comes into Cloud SIEM. It gets enriched with additional information. So every single event that comes in, if it's got an external IP, we enrich it with the ASN info. If it has got some kind of indicator, an IP address, a file hash, a domain name, a URL, we can also leverage threat intelligence, do a lookup for those, and actually enhance that record with any matches for threat intel just at that level. And then additionally, if I have things like Active Directory, I can enhance that user with additional context from Active Directory as well. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, those records are then processed across the rules engine to create signals. And then those signals are then clustered together dependent on the entity and the severity score. So an entity could be a user, could be an IP address, could be a host name. In fact, it could be anything. I can create custom entities in the platform. And then they're clustered together. When the severity score for that entity reaches a certain threshold, then an insight is generated, which contains the timeline of activity for that entity. And it makes it nice and easy then for me to go and investigate. So with that, let me just jump across then and we'll go into the live platform. It's going to be 2 seconds while I jump across. Okay, cool. Here we go. So this is our Cloud SIEM Enterprise dashboard that we can see here. Again, up in that top left-hand corner are those kind of 3 key things that I just mentioned. So here in our demo environment, I'm looking at a 24-hour window. I can change that out. I can go down to 4 hours or back to 7 days. So you can see I've got 8 million records, which has been broken down into just over 500,000 signals. And again, it's worth emphasizing that in a traditional SIEM platform, that's where I would probably go in and do my investigation. Now, from that 500,000 signals, we've actually brought out 8 things here that you need to go and investigate straight away. The left-hand panel here actually gives me some SOC metrics around my KPIs. We also pass this information back into the Sumo core platform to give me more comprehensive dashboarding here around what's happening within my SOC. So all of our signals are attributed to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Here I get a very quick snapshot of which of those attack stages or steps are most prevalent in my environment. So I can see here that the tactic for persistence is the most prevalent currently. I can also see things like my average hours to detect, my mean time to detect, mean time to respond, and mean time to remediate. How my insights are being closed and who they're being closed by. So coming back here to Cloud SIEM, this panel in the center here, this kind of radar view, that's just another snapshot really of my records, signals, and insights. So the outer ring are my records, inner ring signals, and then these little color triangles, those are the insights that are being generated. They'll be color coded dependent on whether they're new, in progress, assigned to a dedicated team, or closed. Right-hand side is a kind of a baseball card view of my latest insight that's been generated. So you can see by the insight name here, the number is sequential. So the next one will be 18767. But we pull those MITRE attack tactics and techniques labels up, and we actually create that as the name of the insight. So we can see this one here is being detected as a discovery with credential access and execution. Here's the entity involved. In this case, it's an IP address. And then this panel here really is kind of my timeline of when those signals are being generated. The vertical axis is my severity score for those signals. I can see how many signals are part of the insight, what the overall severity is, and how long this detection window is. So you probably recall back at the beginning, I said we have this capability to look back over 14 days out of the box, but I can go back further. So I can pick up those kind of low and slow attacks that may be happening. The global confidence scoring, this is pretty cool, and it's unique to Sumo Logic. So because we're a SaaS platform, what we have the ability to do here is to look at what our customers are doing. And we can anomalize that information. We crowdsource it, we pull it back in. Every time a customer closes an insight and they mark it as a true incident, false positive, no action, etc., we simply look at the signals that are part of that insight. And then we make a prediction every time an insight is now generated for another customer. So the higher the score, the more confident we are that it's a real incident. The lower the score, could be a false positive, could be something new that we're currently building that score capability out with. So that's pretty cool. If I've got junior analysts in my SOC, it helps them prioritize the things that need to be looked at. You know, they can go and investigate the higher priority global confidence scores. Finally, here on the main screen is just a quick snapshot view of which of my security analysts are working on which insights, and it'll tell me about any new insights that have been generated as well. So with that, let me jump in and take you through the insight view. So this is what we call our Kanban view board. It's the start of my workflow, the start of making life really easy for me as a SOC analyst now. The screen here looks pretty full up because obviously this is a demo environment. So we like to generate lots of things for you guys to have a look at. If I wanted to come in here now, for example, and just reassign this particular insight to my tier 3 team, or actually, let's say I want to reassign it to the email team, I can just drag it across to the appropriate column, and then it'll update it and move that across for me accordingly. Okay. In this view here, again, you can see it contains that same kind of information that was in that baseball card view. And you can see my global confidence scores here are quite different for each one. And that's where we're building those out automatically. So this Deb Smith user that I've just moved across here, you know, we're 95% confident that this particular insight is, you know, malicious activity. So with that, let's actually start taking a look at some of these here. I'm going to jump in and look at this one down here, for example. When I click through, it brings me into my workbench view. There's two main panels here, really. My left-hand panel contains information about the insight itself. So again, when did it happen? What are the MITRE tags that are associated with it, or any other custom tag that I want to create? You can see there's one here for administrator, for example. The top part is where I would come back to progress this once I've investigated. So we'll come back and look at that in a second. The very top here is a timeline view of my signals that are being generated. So I can hover over any of these and it'll give me a very quick view of which signal is there, and it also highlights it further down in the view for me. So if I go back to this one, you can see the proof point one highlights. If I go to this one, you'll see the checkpoint one at the bottom of the screen highlights. And I can click through at this level if I wanted to. However, this is a really, really cool thing. This is what I really love about Cloud SIEM, is just this ease now for me to be able to investigate what's happened here. As I scroll down through this timeline of activity that's been built out for me as part of this insight, the very first thing I can see here is that I've got a user that's received an email with a phishing link. Okay, this is coming in off of my, my Proofpoint log source. My key pieces of information are extracted here at the top level. So I have access to things like, what was the action? Was it allowed? Was it denied? Etc. Any device IPs. So this is the IP address that we're tracking as the entity for this example. And then any other fields that you would commonly expect as part of that security event are pulled up here to this top level. I can drill down deeper if I want to. I'll show you that in a second. But going back to my investigation, so this is my first one. Users received an email with a phishing link. The next thing I've got here is an alert from Checkpoint saying, hey, a malicious file was allowed through. Then as I scroll down a bit further, I've got a CrowdStrike alert coming from my EDR solution saying, hey, I've detected a malicious file trying to be executed on the endpoint. And then finally, I've got a threat intel match here that's saying, hey, the file hash is on a known list that we currently ingest. Have a little think about how long it would take you to build that picture up in your current system. Certainly from my experience of working in a SOC and dealing with phishing emails coming through, I may have got an alert from my EDR. Okay, so CrowdStrike might have fired an alert and said, hey, malware detected. Then I'd have to look at that alert. Who was the user involved? What was the endpoint? How did the file get there? Was it from a USB? Did it click on a link? Did it come in by email? Typically, from my experience, it took me about 2 hours to manually build this timeline of activity to give me this picture of what's happened. Whereas here you can see within Cloud SIEM, literally in under a minute, I've been able to come to that conclusion. Users received an email with a phishing link, they've clicked on the link, downloaded malware, and then malware has tried to execute on my endpoint. Okay. Now that I've come to that conclusion, I've got a couple of different options here. If I'm containing all of my workflow within Cloud SIEM, maybe as a SOC analyst, I would call the user, give them some education about not clicking on phishing emails, run a full system scan on the endpoint, and then close this insight as being resolved. Maybe I want to pass it to another team. Okay, so I've got a team that performs antivirus or malware tasks for me. So I might want to reassign it to that team and say, hey, can you do a full system scan? Can you quarantine this endpoint? I have the ability to do that here using a number of ways. So I have pretty much an endless list of integrations here that I can pass this to. So if it's something as simple as I use Slack in my environment, I could actually send this to a Slack channel. I can have a dedicated one set up in here for each team. If I'm using a third-party ITSM tool like ServiceNow, Jira, etc., then I can pass this out to that tool, get an external incident raised, and then manage it from there. I could simply just email it to somebody here as well. I can click on Email Insight. Again, I could customize these dependent on the team, and then that would reassign that to that particular team. If I'm running something like Sumo Logic's Cloud SOAR, I can just click on Create Incident, choose what template I want to run. So here it might be something like a basic phishing template. Click on Create Incident, and then that will go off for me and create that in my SOAR component. Okay, that's then going to run a playbook. The playbook will do whatever I've told it to do. Maybe quarantine the endpoint, do some additional lookup. Run the file hash against an external lookup system, etc. Whatever I want to configure that to do. couple of things here I think is worth pointing out to you. So I talked a little bit about enrichment and how we enrich things at the record level. So you'll notice at the top I have an enrichment tab here as well. So if I click on that one, because the user involved here is an Active Directory user, okay, I'm bringing in those Active Directory attributes in, so I get a bit more context here around maybe who the user is, where they're located, who their manager is, whatever I want to configure AD to tell me, you know, as my additional information. I've got an external reputation lookup here. Actually, this has probably come back from my SOAR tool thinking about it. So you know, I've run the playbook and the playbook's now come back and actually enriched this insight for me with this additional information. So, you know, my playbook probably says, hey, go to Cisco Umbrella, do a reputation lookup. That's now populating that information for me. Same thing with virus total. Whether I'm running a SOAR tool or not, I can still get enrichment with virus total. If I've registered for an account with virus total, get the API key, I can plug the API key in here direct, and they'll go and grab that information for me. As I come down through here, I've got information like who is a logged on user, and then some enrichment from CrowdStrike as well. And we can get this from pretty much anything, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike. You know, that'll come back and give me context around the endpoint that was involved. And then some other usual things, NS lookup, recorded future information, and so on. So the whole purpose here really is, instead of me having to copy and paste an IP, copy and paste a file hash, open up a new tab, go to an external site, I can enrich everything into this single investigation point for me. Okay, so it speeds up my investigation time within the tool. So that's pretty much kind of how we investigate insights. Let me come back here and I'll just quickly take you through another one to show you some other information that we can bring in as well. So if I click on this one here for dev server, now instead of looking at an IP address, I'm looking at a host name. Similar kind of story. I've got that timeline being built out for me automatically. Okay, so the first thing I've got here is an AWS guard duty alert saying, hey, I'm detecting cryptocurrency, Bitcoin mining tool on an instance. Gives me that key information again here. Then I've got a thread intel file hash saying, you know, we're aware that the file hash for this executable is known bad. And then I've got a Carbon Black alert this time as my EDR that I'm running within my AWS environment, saying that it's detected this malware running. And then finally, here's an interesting one as well. So for a lot of our customers, they use the Sumo Logic core platform for infrastructure monitoring, application monitoring, etc. Because we have the ability to put metrics onto servers, instances, and so on, it's also brought an alert across here saying, hey, I'm detecting a high CPU usage of greater than 75% over 5 minutes. And because we're tracking all of this on the host, the dev server as the entity, it's included that one for me as well. Okay, so quite clearly here, I can see that I've got, you know, crypto mining software running on an instance, you know, and I've got the story here of, yes, it definitely is, you know, I'm matching a file hash, the malware's detecting it as well, and it's being backed up by this metric as well that's telling me that, you know, it's seeing this high CPU usage. So now I can just reassign this maybe to my AWS administrator team, say, hey, can you go and, you know, do whatever you need to do with this instance, run a scan on it. If it doesn't need to be there, or we can rebuild it or whatever, no problem. And that can be reassigned to be quickly addressed. So that kind of sums up insights and how they're generated. If I want to look at what else is happening in the platform, I can view signals and investigate those as well. So if I come down here, I'm going to click into this signal here for Carbon Black, for example. In each signal that's generated, I can see the match expression. So this is the rule expression that's being used for detection on this one. Pretty simple. My expression is saying, hey, if the vendor is Carbon Black, the product is defense, and the device event ID is either threat or threat hunter, and the category matches new malware, then create a signal. Okay, so that's the rule logic. This is the signal. Again, here's the entity. As I said, we track entities, and I can see what it's related to here as well. So I can see that this IP address is related to that Win10 hostname. And we do similar things with users as well. We track that relationship between them. As I mentioned on the previous one when we were looking at the insight, I've got a lot more context inside the signal that I can view. Anything here with a gold star is a favorited field. So anything that I like to see at the top level as a security analyst, I can favorite that into the top level. So again, it makes life easy for me. I can just scan the header of this signal and get my key pieces of information. What was the alert? What was the host name? What was the device IP? What's the threat type, username involved, etc., etc. Okay. So that's kind of what a signal looks like. As I mentioned earlier, we have 600 out-of-the-box content rules. They are curated by our in-house team of SOC analysts. We update those a couple of times a week. So anytime we see something new, Log4j, for example, we get content released literally within a matter of hours of that being noted or made public. Any new updates that come through, there's a little red dot icon here that you can see. I come down to announcements, and then I get a snapshot view here of what content has been updated in the current release. I can click on read more, takes me through, and then gives me a more in-depth view of what did we release as part of this content update. Okay. So it's really cool. It takes away a lot of my back-end engineering. I don't have to do content creation or content management. That's all done for me by Sumo Logic. However, having said that, if I do need to create custom content, then I have the ability to do that. I can come in and create a new rule. As you can see here, any of you guys on the call that are familiar with SIEM platforms, these are fairly typical kind of detection rules, right? Match rule, matching a single alert, maybe a certain event ID from an EDR to create a signal. Threshold rule, multiple failed events within a set time window. Chain rule, classic example, brute force, right? 10 failed attempts followed by a success. And then I can aggregate events together as time, over a set time period as well. So, X number of things happening within a set time window where the value is Y. So I can do that as well. When it comes to rule tuning as well, this is, another kind of difficult challenge we have traditionally. If I come in and I want to modify one of these rules, for example. So let's say this CrowdStrike one here, I want to exclude a certain host name, which is the one I use for, for running tests against, hopefully not in a live environment. But if I wanted to exclude that host, traditionally what I'd have to do here, I'd have to copy this existing rule, disable the original, modify the copy. Now, the challenge I have there is if Sumo Logic comes along and we improve the detection logic for that particular rule, you don't get that benefit, right? Because you're now running from a copy of that rule. So we have a concept within Sumo, sorry, I thought Siri was listening into me there, of rule tuning. So what I can do with rule tuning, if I want to exclude a host now from triggering a certain rule, is I can come in here and create a filter. I'm going to just show you one that's here already. So for this one here, we're saying, hey, I want to exclude a user from triggering password sprays. I can come in here, I can choose either one or multiple rules, or I can choose all rules. I would select my rule. So my rule here for this one is this Active Directory password spray attack. And I'm saying, hey, I want you to not include a system account. But I could put in there, any user. If I want to exclude an IP from triggering, then I would use the same format, but I would just do source IP is not 192.168.5.25, whatever. Okay, by doing that, I'm not modifying that existing rule. So, you know, if I come along now and I update that rule, or sorry, if Sumo Logic updates that rule, then I benefit from any changes there as well. So that's a really cool feature. Nice and easy to manage as well. All of my rule tuning is in one place. So I can come in here and have a look at, you know, see what's being generated and created. So the other thing I want to quickly show you is our entities. Every time a signal fires, we grab the entity details and we populate it into our entity table. And I can come in here and actually look at any entity and understand what they're doing currently. So if I take this, this user here, Napoleon, I can see that the current activity score for this user is 12 points of severity. Anything above 13 is going to now create an insight for me, and I can see how that user's tracking currently. So if I come down here, let it populate, you'll see this is an Active Directory user, so I'm getting my Active Directory context on the left-hand side. These are the signals I'm currently tracking as part of my insight clustering. So you can see the current score is 12, and that's over these two signals, 10 and 2. Any previous history for this particular user is listed here as well. So any insights they've generated previously, and if I keep scrolling all the way through, it'll show me pretty much all of their history that they've done previously. I can also get another snapshot view here as well, using my show user timeline capability. What this is going to do is it's going to actually drop me back into the core platform and show me what this user's history is in here as well. So if I just let that populate out for a second. So here I can see anything that this user has done. I can actually go back and say, well, what else has this user been involved with over the last 7 days? So I change my panel to 7 days, and then this will update for me. And I can see the activity timeline here, you know, which of the signals this user has been generating in order, in a chronological order. Signal timeline, where this user has been logging in from. How many distinct addresses this user's had. So I'm starting to build some pretty useful kind of user behavior views here of what this user is actually doing. Okay, so that's a good way to kind of demonstrate how we can leverage the core platform to give me really good context as well. So coming back onto entities, just one final thing here, I guess. If I come down through and find something like an external IP address, 167, there we go, that's external, then we populate that with ASN information in our left-hand panel. Okay, so for users, it'll be Active Directory if it's an AD user. If it's an external IP, then we'll get that kind of context there. And again, here's that related entity thing as well. So this IP is being associated with this host name, for example. Okay. So that kind of is a quick snapshot view, I guess, of Cloud SIEM and how it works. Let me just quickly jump back to the last couple of slides on this presentation. And just talk to you a bit about our kind of global presence. So obviously I'm located here in Sydney. So we have an instance here in Sydney. Across APAC, we have an instance in Mumbai and Tokyo. And then you can see for the US and Europe as well. We also have one in Dublin in Ireland as well. It doesn't show up on there for some reason. So we kind of got a good global footprint. I've got a lot of customers, although they're Australia based, their parent company might be US, for example. So they host, you know, in the US, or they might have a local instance here and an instance in the US as well. And with that, I'm going to leave you with that QR code there. So if you want to grab that with your mobile phone, it'll take you away and give you some more information about Cloud SIEM. But I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I don't see any there in the Q&A currently, but if you've got any questions in the last couple of minutes, I'm more than happy to answer any of those for you. If not, then you know, that QR code there will take you away and give you some more information. And finally, I think this one probably, yeah, so this has got our sales@sumologic.com address. So if you do need any more information, you can email that address there as well. And those guys will happily provide you with any additional information. Okay. So with that, there's no questions there. So thank you very much for your time. It's been really appreciated. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And with that, I will stop the webinar. So once again, thank you very much, and hope to see you all again on another one in the future.